All right, so now I'm going to get straight into building out the geocoding and display of these items, which ideally we're going to be able to probably on the profile page, we could display a little map pop-up just to show where the location of the house is, like what part of town it's in. And then on this home page, we would be able to filter through the listings using a location that we search for, and then we only show the places in a certain proximity. And we could also display a map. I think Airbnb does display a map. Let me go back to their website. Let's do a search. So yeah, when you search, it actually pops up the listings on the left and then a map on the right. And this is what it kind of looks like. It just shows you the price in a little thing on the map. So we can try to think about how we can do that. Or if we just need to get an MVP set up for now, that's fine. Yeah, that's not a bad setup. So yeah, if we could get that working, that'd be great. So let's go straight over to the code. One thing that I think is that we might not need is this header that just says listings. I mean, it's not a big deal, but also it's not really doing anything UI wise. We could probably just remove that and that would be fine. And then we could just get straight into adding some sort of search field at the top of the page. But first of all, we need to have the logic to be able to search these records anyways. And for that, we're going to use the Geocoder gem for Ruby. If we go to the Geocoder gem, it's this super helpful gem that was created by this guy, Alex Reisner. Just really helpful because it's going to use open source map data to help you do all of these different things. You can geocode in both directions. So if you have the latitude and longitude already, you can pull up a location for that. You can get it from the IP address, and it also connects to more than 40 APIs. So yeah, it's super helpful. I've been using this in my previous videos, and it's worked really great. So you can just simply do a search and get the coordinates for a location, but you can also just do this helper method on the model, where you can say it's geocoded by this attribute. And we do have an address attribute, so it'd be as easy as just copying this into our app. But we also need to have a latitude and longitude field, which is going to be type float or decimal. But overall, it's super easy to use. All right, let's get into building this feature. So the first thing we have to do is add this gem to our app. So I'm just going to go stop my server real quick, and then I'll run the bundle add geocoder gem. Well, just like this, bundle add geocoder, and I'll press enter, and boom, we now have the geocoder gem. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the latitude and longitude attributes to our listing model. I'm pretty sure that's what we called it. If we go to models, yep, we have a listing model right here. So let's create this migration in the terminal by doing a Rails G migration add lat long attributes to listings. And then we can pass in the attributes, which is going to be latitude. Let me make sure I spell that right. That's going to be a decimal. And longitude is also a decimal. And then we'll just press enter. And before I migrate the database, I'm going to check this migration to make sure everything's right. So I'll just copy the name of the file and run a cat on that. And as you can see, we're adding a column to the listings model, which is latitude, and this is a decimal. We're also adding the longitude, which is a decimal. So that's perfect. Let's just run railsdb migrate, and we now have those two attributes on our model. That's perfect. And we can even restart the server now. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the documentation, and it says we can add this attribute, geocoded by address. We can grab that line, and let's go over to our models listing.rb, and we can pop this right into here. So now we have it set up that our listing model is geocoded by address. I'm also zooming in here so you guys can see it a little bit better. Another cool thing is it adds a geocode method, which you can invoke via callback. So we can grab this callback right here and set it up. So after validation, it's going to automatically geocode and save that latitude and longitude, which is perfect because we don't have to worry about adding in our own code to set the lat and longitude. It's going to automatically do it, which is just amazing. So now I'm going to try to get the latitude and longitude set for our existing listings, because since we didn't have that code before we created the listings, we never stored the latitude and longitude for these. So I'm going to try to set that right now by going to the terminal and opening up Rails console. And first of all, let's just do a listing dot luck latitude longitude, just so you can see that they're all nil. It's returning nil for each listing. So our goal is to update these. So I think what we can do is we can do a listing dot for each, and then we can pass a block and save. So this is actually a shorthand helper. So instead of having to do like the curly brackets and say dot save, it's just going to automatically do that with the ampersand sign, the colon, and save. Now we do see a thing. It says undefined method for each for class. So I think we have to say dot all first. So listing dot all dot for each. And okay, no, that's not actually it. Should be like find each. Oh yeah, check that out. So find each works. For whatever reason, I thought it was for each, because that makes sense too. But it looks like something did happen. Let's see. So if I try to do that pluck again, we have the latitude and longitude, but we only have it for 2 of them, which is kind of strange. It's very strange. And it looks like it kind of takes a second to run. So what's up with the first listing? Try to see this listing dot first. You'd think that this address would be able to be geocoded. But for whatever reason, we're not getting the latitude and longitude for this location, which is strange. But sometimes I have noticed that, let's say that the OpenStreetMap data that they're using is outdated. Let's say it's from like 10 years ago, and this street is new. Although this one, I mean, yeah, who knows? This could have just been woods 10 years ago, and now they added this whole country club. So that's kind of what I'm thinking, because Austin especially is a very, uh, it's rapidly growing, rapidly developing. So a lot of this stuff might not have existed a couple years ago even. So I'm gonna guess that that's why the location is not popping up, which is annoying. That's annoying. So ideally, we would have a fallback where, let's say, the address isn't available to actually display. Maybe we could at least store the latitude and longitude of the city itself. We could try to look into something like that. But for right now, I think the best option would just to be to try a different address. So let me just check which listings don't have the latitude and longitude. So it's going to be the first, second. You know what? Let's pluck the name of it too. What's the title? It's going to be these 3 titles we have to go and change. So I'm actually going to go into a new tab so I can store these values, and then I'll start the server in a new tab and we can reload. So the first one I'm going to change is this AquaZen. And let's try to find a new address. So first I'm going to go to Zillow again, and we are going to look up the houses in Austin. Let's try to find one that's more likely to be, I mean, we're not really going to know that, I guess, but the ones in downtown, like, they're not adding more streets in downtown because that's not possible. It's probably more on the outskirts that they're adding additional streets and developing. So if we grab a house right down here, I'm sure that this address would show up. Let's plop this in. Even though it's not the correct address, doesn't really matter. All right, so now I'm going to go back to the terminal and I'm going to reload, and let's run our pluck again. And for whatever reason, it's still not working. Listing.first.save. Come on. It's supposed to set that latitude and longitude. I don't know what's going on. All right, so maybe that address also doesn't work. It's hard to think that it just wouldn't show up. Let's try to grab this one. Update listing. There we go. So now we have it set, and we just have to set the latitude, longitude for the two other ones. So we're gonna do magical cabin. We need an address for this. That works. Now, honestly, I think it's because this probably uses OpenStreetMaps. I'm not really sure what it uses by default. I wish they would tell us. Default. Trying to find what they use as a default API. Oh, look, there's actually the API guide. You probably want to take a look at this. So we have a couple of different options. Now, I want to see what is the default. Default API. I don't even know. Does Geocoder gem used by default? Let's see. By default, Geocoder makes use of the Google's geocoding API. See, that's what I always thought, but now apparently it looks like it's pulling up open source data. I just saw something will be used by default. The pure This lookup provides methods for geocoding IP address without making a call to remote API. That's not what I was looking for. But look at how many APIs there are. So they have an Azure API, they have a Google street address lookups, but some of them require an API key. I'm just confused. What would be the default? Actually, what is the default API? So I wonder if I can pull down, it looks like they're using this lookup key. So if I go into the console and I just type geocoder class, and I try to grab the lookup key, or maybe I have to grab config. Oh, check that out. So if I grab the geocoder config, it shows all the options. I wonder if we also have a geocoder initializer. It doesn't really look like we do. Nope. So it's just going to be using the defaults. And as we can see in the console, it's using no min atim, which I don't know what that is. Right here. Nomatim. So you have API key none. The quota is 1 request per second. So yeah, obviously if we do this, Nomatin is a tool to search OSM data by name and address. That's why we aren't getting the most accurate results, but it still works though. Don't get me wrong, it still works very well. But it's just not perfect compared to if we were going to use something like Google Maps. That's one thing that we probably want to know, that we want to think about. We could also just see for the API key none. Those are the ones that you can use for free and without having an API key. So we have something called Photon, open source geocoding engine. Okay. And we have one for France. We have one for Canada. Luxembourg. Netherlands. So depending on where you're going to be building your app for, you can take advantage of one of these. But I guess by default, it's using Nomatin, which I did not know until now. But if we wanted to use Google, we could do that. But it's pay as you go, so you are going to have to pay for this access to use Google. Anyways, I think this is fine for now. I'm glad that there is an open source option, because that makes it easier for us. But I mean, it makes it free, so I don't have to pay to set this up, even though I bet it's not that expensive at all. But still, I would rather have it be free. Yeah, so interesting. Now we know that. So if I check, we just have to go and update these two other addresses. I mean, we don't have to technically, but I'm just going to do it because why not? If I come over here, let's see if this address pops up. It might also have a hard time with the apartment number. Wonder if that affects it. Oh, look, I think that might be an issue with this library. So if I get rid of the apartment number, would it be able to pull that latitude and longitude? It does. So I think maybe that's what's happening. If you pass in an apartment number, it breaks this Nomatin search, which I'm gonna go to their GitHub repo real quick. Nomatin. I wonder if anybody has noticed that. Issues. But it also could be the geocoder gem, which is maybe doing the request wrong. Enable ability to ignore apartment floors. Look, and all these people say they're getting that issue. But then they closed it at one point. But why didn't they... Oh, closing this in favor of this other ticket. Add address unit support to Nomatin. Interesting. So that does get more tricky. So I wonder if the geocoder gem, if they have any issues about this. Like apartment number. They don't have a single issue about this. So, I mean, honestly, I don't know if this is even something that we'd want to add to this gem because some of them do work. But I don't know, maybe if I could test, if I could verify, like, I mean, I already did verify that removing this pound sign did fix my issue, but maybe I can do an internal fix for this. So maybe before we geocode, we could automatically gsub or remove this number. I wonder if we could do that. I'm gonna go over to Rubular, which is a regex expression where we can test with our expressions. And I've wanted to find, occurrences of a pound sign and one or more of any number. So we can do /d, and then we could do plus, which means any amount of. I think this will work. We just have to gsub out these values, and we need to add a custom after validation geocode. Validation. Look, we definitely don't want to remove it from the address field because the user might need, like the user would need to know if they're going to a certain apartment number. They would need to know that. Although usually on Airbnb, the host would put the number inside the description or inside of the check-in details. But still, we probably want to make sure that that is not an issue. Now, ultimately, what's probably happening though is it's just using this code right here. this search. So we can always add our custom geocode. So why don't we go to the after validation and let's say custom geocode. We'll create this method, custom geocode, and we're basically just going to grab the results for the address. But let's do something called address without apartment number. And this is going to be the address, but we gsub. Gsub means find and replace. We can put in our custom regex, which I forget which way to do this. I think you have to, don't you have to escape this, the backward slash? I don't remember. Maybe this is good. Interesting. I don't know. Let me try to run this in the console first and see if there's any issue. So let's say listing equals listing.last address equals listing.address. Actually, address has two D's, of course. And if we gsub and try to replace with an empty string, well, this one, the address actually doesn't have a number. So that's not going to work. Say last, this one doesn't have a number either. So let's just go and add a number. So we can do plus equals. Let's put in a random apartment number. And then we can try to run our gsub. For whatever reason, it's not there. Check it out, it does work. See, any text that you put here, it'll replace it with. So if you just do empty string, it'll just remove that last number. And then we can even strip too, which means it'll remove any white space from the start or the end, which that's probably helpful too. So this is what our code would end up looking like. Now, I know there's also ways, sometimes people, instead of doing like pound sign, they'll say like apartment, like that in the address, and that could also potentially mess it up because it would change the address that we're looking for. But let's not get too caught up on it. For right now, all of the results that I'm getting from Zillow are using the pound sign, and I want to fix that particular issue. So we can just do the gsub strip, and then we'll pass this in. We'll get the coordinates, and let's it'd be like latitude, say self.latitude equals self.longitude. Now, I don't even know if latitude is first or longitude is second. That's like another thing that we don't know, but somebody probably knows it. But I'm guessing that it is, that latitude's first. Now what we can do is we can save, and we can do validate false so that it doesn't, you know, keep iterating, because since this is on the after validation callback, we don't want it to run again when we save. So we'll just do validate false. And yeah, not even sure if that'll work. Oh, you know what? We already have the Rails server running here. I'm gonna go in the console and let's just do the pluck again. So we have that last one that's not going. If I pluck what the address is, the weird thing is that this doesn't even have a number on it. It really doesn't. Anyways, I'm hoping that this fixes it. So if I went and I just grabbed like another apartment address, like this one. Oh, right. Look, right away, it's the different address type. Now it's apartment 320 instead of the pound sign. So this was kind of a wasted feature. And then sometimes they say unit. So it's very not, it's not very consistent. So having some custom code like this actually doesn't really make sense because we're only handling one scenario. Right? Like let's just get rid of this. Let's go back to regular geocode. And yeah, that was kind of a waste of a feature, but whatever. Now what I do know is if we were using the Google Maps API, they would easily be able to understand all of that stuff. But it looks like this API does not. Which is fine. We can always just manually remove the apartment number from the address. Although ideally it would work. Let me see. So if I grab, what was that last? Go back to the pluck again. What was that last one? So it's entire guest house. Let's just do a little test. If I drop in this address, it does have an apartment number, but why would that break? You know what I mean? Let's do reload. Nope, it does not work. So what happens if I go and edit it and I remove the apartment? It does work. So, I mean, there you have it. This API that we're using, it doesn't really work well with the apartment. But one thing that we could do though is we could handle this on the user side. Whoops, I keep trying to start the server again. So what if we just tell them like don't include, we could put a little message like don't include the apartment number in the address, but we give them an additional field. I've seen that on a bunch of websites where they do like address to, or we could just say apartment/unit number, and they could put it in an additional field. I think that's a good way of handling it. Yeah, that is something that we want to do. You know what I might do is I might create a little to-do list. And I can write down these features. So first of all would be add apartment/unit field on listing form. Prompt user to put apartment number inside of that field rather than the original address field. I think that's a great idea actually. Now another feature I wanted to add was, I remember on the owner sign up, when you click the button to sign up as an owner, it doesn't do anything, which is really surprising. I don't know why I didn't fix that before. Maybe I did, but then I didn't push the code or something. I don't know. So let's say fix owner sign up to replace the button with the form for Stripe. Sign up their details. So that's really all we have to do, like a simple turbo stream update with the new state. And other than that, I'm sure there's plenty of things to do. I'm not going to write down the rest of the to-dos for this video, which is just geocoding. But now we have latitude and longitude, guys. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to display these locations of these houses on a map. And I think what I'll do is I'll start with the listing show page, because that's a really easy way to start. We can just go and try to display a map with the location of this address of the address of the listing on it. And we could do that somewhere inside of here. Oh, you know what? Another thing I want to do is, this description is just so huge. I want to try to collapse it and put it as a pop-up, kind of like they do on Airbnb. See, they usually truncate it so that it doesn't take up a ton of space. And then you can click show more and it pops up the whole description in a modal. So let's add that as a feature right away. Truncate description listing and add show more button to pop up in a modal. All right, that's definitely a to-do that we want to handle. Yeah, the next thing we're going to do is just display these on a map, or individually first, and then we can handle this main page of searching for listings on a map. All right, so now let's try to display this listing on a map. And that'll be the first step, where we can just have a map that shows the location of this house. So to do that, I'm going to be using the library LeafletJS, which is a super cool open source map library, which allows you to easily create these maps and then put stuff like markers on top of them and a bunch more than even just that. So to get started with LeafletJS, we have to first install it. So we can go over to the download section, and I guess you can actually download a version of LeafletJS. I haven't tried to do this yet, but you can also use a hosted version, which is going to pull it via CDN. But you know what? Downloading it locally, I'm sure would be a lot faster. But I've never tried to do this. If we just click on it though, I'm guessing it's just going to be LeafletJS folder. We're going to have a JS file, a CSS file. Interesting. So I wonder how you do that. So we unzip it and then add this to the head of your HTML code. Okay, that actually seems pretty easy. Maybe we'll try to do this time, which I never really do. So what we can do is, I mean, I feel like I would usually put it in the vendor folder, right? That's where you put your third-party JavaScript libraries that you download. I think that's what you're supposed to do. So if we just copy this leaflet folder and drag it into vendor, like that should work, right? And then all we have to do is add a link and a script tag, but I'm not sure if this will actually work because the way that HTML loads up, I don't know if we can actually put a path to this vendor folder, but we can try. So if we go to the app, views, layouts, application file, that's where we have all of our imports for JavaScript and style sheets. That's where all those tags that are importing the code are. So I'll put this right under, we can really just drop it anywhere. We're gonna have a link for the style sheet and a link for the script tag. Now my question is, can I even reference this vendor folder? I'm not sure about that, but we need to get to this leaflet.css and leaflet.js. So in my mind, if we were able to just do some embedded Ruby right here, there's a method we can use called rails.root, and then we can join it, and we can say like vendor slash leaflet slash the name of this file, and hypothetically this is creating a direct route or a route from the top of the Rails folder all the way into the vendor folder and the leaflet folder. So this might work, although I'm not that confident because I almost feel like you need to have these files publicly available in the URL for this to work. So I'm not sure, but we can try this out. So I'll actually just reload and see if we get an error. So yeah, we do get an error. It's saying it's not found because it's trying to make a direct request to that folder. So that is not working. Now, another way we could do this is if I just drop this in the public folder. I know everything in the public folder does get publicly available in the URL. So technically, if we drop this in here, and then we just get rid of this Rails root join, and instead we'll just reference directly slash leaflet and then slash the name of the file. We just have to get rid of the Rails code. This hypothetically should work. Just sticking it in the public folder. I mean, I'm not seeing an error, so that's good. And yeah, seems not bad. So now we can go back to the example and we can actually try to initialize a map and get it to display on our page. So let's go and add a section for a map on the listing show page. So I'll go back to the code and I'll go over to the app views, layouts, or not layouts, apps views, listings, and then the show page. And on this show page, we can pick where we want to put the map. I think I'll put it underneath the description. So I'll just put a div and I'll give it a fixed height. So let's say height 40 view height, and I'll give it an ID map. And this is where we're going to initialize the map, but we're going to have to use some JavaScript to actually set this up. So to do that, I'm going to use stimulus.js, which is the built-in JavaScript framework. So first of all, we need to generate a stimulus controller for handling the map code. So I'm going to go in the terminal and I'm going to run railsg stimulus, and I'll put the name of the controller, which I'm just going to use map. And that is going to generate us a map controller.js inside of our JavaScript controllers folder. Now we can just restart, and to connect our stimulus controller that we just generated to this div, we can add a data controller attribute and then pass in the name of the controller, which is map. And finally, we're going to go over to the JavaScript side. So we'll go into app JavaScript controllers and then map controller. And here's where we can add our code to initialize the map. And we're going to want to put this inside of the connect function because connect means whenever your element shows up on the page. So whenever you load the page and it sees this, it's going to run the connect code. So that's where we're going to want to initialize the map. We can drop this in. And I am going to change a few things. So instead of using var, I'm going to use a class variable. So say this.map. And I'll have to update wherever we're referencing the map. And boom, now I'm just going to try this out. The only reason I'm using a class variable, by the way, is because I know that var is it's like deprecated now. I don't think many people use var anymore in JavaScript. So let's reload. Let's see if this works. And boom, check it out. We have a map. It's way at the bottom, like I said. So that's why I want to truncate this description, because this description is just so huge. You know what? I can probably take a crack at this. Let's just make a description scrollable. So right now we're just popping it out. We're not even wrapping it in a div. So let's wrap the description in a div. And then we'll say class height 20 view height with full. We'll say overflow y auto, which means if there's overflowing content, which in this case there is, it'll just use scroll. Which, hey, that's actually pretty clean. And on Mac, it automatically hides the scroll bar anyway, so it looks pretty slimmed down. I don't mind that. All right, so we have that, and then we have our map right underneath. But right by default, it's loading up London, which of course this is in Austin. So we want to make sure that we're loading up the correct location. So to do that, we just need to pass in our latitude and longitude to the map. So what I'll do is I'll pass this in by doing data values. We can say data map, and we could say latitude, longitude value. So say latitude value, just to make it simpler. In my previous videos, I was using X and Y, but then I realized that with maps, it's more, I mean, it's you technically could call latitude, longitude, X and Y. Probably a bunch of people do, but why don't we just do latitude and longitude so it's more explicit? We can do this. Data map latitude value is equal to the listing latitude. So we're going to pass that in. And then we can pass in the data map longitude value. We'll pass in the listing longitude. Just like that. And yeah, now we have the latitude and longitude. And then we can go to our map controller and let's set up those values. So to use those values that we're passing in, we have to define a static values. This is going to be an object or hash, and we're going to pass in the name of the value, and then we're going to put the type. So this is going to be a number. We also have the longitude, which is a number. And then what we can do is right when we're setting the view, we can just set it to the bounds. And then the other number is going to be the radius. I'm not really sure on the correct details for this. We can probably look at the documentation. Creation of the map. There's actually a lot of options that we could look at. There's so much to look in this library, but anyways, we'll just leave it at the default, but let's pass in the correct latitude and longitude. So I'll say this.latitude value, and then we'll pass in this.longitude value for the second parameter. Then we can reload and see what happens. So I don't see any difference. Looks like we're still showing up inside of London. I wonder if it's because of this marker that we're adding. So if I reload, boom, yeah, now it's showing up in Austin. So I guess the marker automatically, or no, it's because we're opening the pop-up automatically. So when you open the pop-up automatically, it's going to actually show that up in that location. So we don't want to be doing that. But for the marker, we'll just put the latitude value and the longitude value. Boom. And yeah, that's actually the location of the property. And then for this pop-up, we don't even need a pop-up if we don't want to, so we can just comment this out. And then it's just showing the location on the map, which I think that's pretty cool. I mean, it's not like we're even giving the address at this point, but we are showing the location on the map. I think that's a good start. And we should be able to go to any of these listings and see it displayed on a map now. It's pretty awesome. Yeah, this is actually really cool. Boom. So we got that done. That was actually really, really easy. And we also know that downloading LeafletJS is very easy as well. I really didn't run into any problems there. And look at all these options. There's like a whole gigantic page of options that we can use. So I'm sure anything that you want to do, you can do with this framework. This is just super cool. All right, so now let's handle adding in the search field and actually displaying these locations, kind of like how Airbnb does it over here. So we can just take a look at how they set this up. It's pretty basic, and I think we can do something like this. Yeah, let's just get straight into it. And then also, it should be very easy for us to do this because we're already comfortable with Leaflet and everything. But yeah, let's just hop right into it. I've been thinking about how I want to implement this. But yeah, let's go over to the listings index page, and this is what we have so far. We still have this BR from where the header was, so let's just delete that. And then what I'll do is I'll add a div up here, which is going to hold our search field where a user can put their location. So let's do with full on this. And this is probably going to be flex call. And actually inside of here, we're going to need a form. So it's essentially just going to be a form, like a regular form in a Rails app, where you can put in different fields. And then finally, you can press the submit button to submit the form. So that's what we're going to be building. So let's do a form width, and then let's pass in the URL, and the URL can just be the same URL that we're on, so the index page. We're just going to make a request there. And because we're making a request to an index page, we're going to have to change the method to a get request. Instead of, by default, the form is going to try to make a post request, or it's going to try to post and then do some sort of creation step, like create a record and then redirect. But in this case, all we're trying to do is update the URL parameters. So you'll pass in the location to the parameter, whatever you want to pass in, and then we'll be able to show the listings for that area if we can find the area. So what we'll do is we'll set up this form. Let's do a do. We'll pass in form as the block variable. I think that's what they call it. And then we're going to have to do an end to end off this block. And then inside of here, we can use the form helpers. We can set a label on form. And this is going to be for the location, by the way. So we're going to have a label for location, a form dot text field for location. And finally, we're going to have a form dot submit. Now, if we reload, this is probably going to be so ugly. And we could just leave it like this, but for this video, I am trying to style it like Airbnb to make it look nice. So let's just go back to the main page and see what that experience looks like. So this is what they show you. It's like where, search destinations, and then basically you just put in wherever location you want to search. So that's fine. So what we could do is we can wrap the label and the text field in a div. So let's wrap these. And then I'm going to add a class of flex call. And then for the label, we have location, but we can also change this to where, like they have on Airbnb. If we reload, now it looks something like this, which is not bad. So this is basically what we want, but definitely I'm going to style it a little bit more. So first of all, for this search field, I might make it a little bit smaller because right now it's like super huge. So we could add a max width on this. We could say max width 2XL MX auto, and that should squish it more in the middle of the page, which I think that doesn't look bad. And now let's style the text field. So for text field, we could add a rounded class. Or actually, let's do rounded full. So that's a little bit better already. And then we could add a placeholder. So that's going to be some text that'll show up inside the input, but it's not going to be real text, but it'll kind of prompt the user to enter something. So we could say enter your dream destination or something like that. And we put in our address or wherever we're going to search. I guess maybe it's not dream destination, but enter your trip's destination. That's probably fine. And then for the save button, I really don't like that. So if we could try to get even something like this, like a little search icon that pops up inside the text field, that would be nice. And we can definitely do that. I've done this before in the past. So all we have to do is we won't be using a form submit because with a submit button, you can only pass in text and you can't pass in an icon or do a block or anything. But we can use a button, which is essentially the same thing as a submit tag. Okay, so yeah, what we're gonna do is instead of doing a submit tag, we are going to use a button tag because then we can use an icon. And the form.submit tag, it doesn't really allow us to do a block or anything. So we're not going to be using that. We're going to use a button tag and then we're going to position it on top of the text field. So to do that, we're going to wrap a div around the text field with a class relative. So let's start with that. And then we can reload, make sure that everything looks right. And as you can see, it doesn't really look right because the text field got smaller. So we might need to add a width full class on this. And that still doesn't really work. So I guess on the text field itself, we need to add a class, which we're going to style this anyways. So we might as well do this now. And let's just say that it should be width full. And now it does take up the full width. But, oh, you know what? We already had a class on this. I didn't even notice that. We already have a class right here. Let's do width full on here as well as rounded full. And boom, now it's going to take up the full width. I also want to add some margin to the bottom, although I think we are going to change this a little bit, but still we're going to need margin. So I'll go to the top level and do margin bottom 4. Yeah, that's not bad at all. And then now we can put the button tag. So this is what it's going to look like. We'll have a button tag, and then we can do type submit so that it knows it is going to be submitting the form. And then we can pass a block. Anything inside of this block we can display inside the button. We can even say submit for now. See what that looks like. And as you can see, it looks just like the submit tag. That's basically the same thing. And then we can apply styling to the button. We can do a class and we can make this have an absolute class. And because there's a relative class wrapping this, it's going to only be absolutely positioned relative to this div. So we can do absolute and then top 2, right 2, and that should position it on the right of this field, just like that. Looks pretty good. We could probably do a little bit more like right 4, but I'll leave the top 2 for now because that's pretty centered. And then really what we're going to do is instead of having text, we're going to do an icon. It's like how they do on Airbnb. So let's go over to hero icons and I'm going to search up a magnifying glass. Let's grab one of these icons and then we'll just replace the search text with the magnifying glass. And then we can style this SVG however we want. So as you can see, do width 6, and then we can style the button to add a background around this like they do on Airbnb. Except for instead of making it the red color, I'm going to do my own color. So let's do BG Indigo 500. And I'll do padding 2, rounded full. Let's see how that looks. All right, not bad. And then we can make the icon actually like a light indigo. Like that. And then we just have to fix the styling because right now it doesn't really look right. So I think to do this, we're going to want to add some padding to the text field first. So let's do py4. And actually that basically fixes it. I think that doesn't look bad. And then we can add a cursor pointer class so that it actually does a cursor pointer effect. And we can add a hover, scale 105, so it gets slightly bigger when you hover. And then we can even add a transition to this. Make it more of like a cool slow effect. Hey, that's not bad. Yeah, I mean, that's a good start. It's not perfect, I would say, but not bad. Yeah, totally not bad. I think we can make it a little bit bigger though. So maybe instead of P2, we'll do P2.5, so slightly larger. All right, hey, that's not bad. All right, so we got this part down. Now to actually implement the searching. So right now we can try to search in Texas and see what we get. And as you can see, it does put the location up in the URL, which is great because we can use that to search later. Another thing that I thought is that, I guess this really doesn't matter. I was going to say we could hide the listings when you come to this page and kind of like center this in the center, but we can always handle that in a second. Right now, let's just handle making this look more like the Airbnb search, where we put the location, we search, and then it shows the listings on the left, the map on the right. If we can try to get something like that, that would be really awesome. And yeah, let's do that right now. So when you do the search, we have to go to the controller, and inside the listings controller, let's go to the index action, which should be somewhere around here. Oh, it's right at the top. So right now we're just showing all of the listings, which is fine. But if a user does put the search in, we can show them a more searched version of the listings. So we could always wrap this in an if condition. So if params location dot present, else we're just going to show all the listings, which means we do have a fallback, kind of like how on Airbnb, if you come here and there's no search in here, they're just going to show you some guest favorites, like some listings that they think you would be interested in. So we're going to do a similar thing. I mean, not really. We're just going to have a fallback so that you still see some listings, but if you really want to search for a certain location, it's going to search these listings and kind of tune down where you're going to search. And I think that's a great start to this. So to actually search the records, I'm going to go back to the Geocoder gem, and I'm going to check out what they're doing as an example. And I know I've done this before. So basically you can just say .near, and then you can pass in whatever they put in. So the parameter of location, that's actually perfect. But all we have to do is we have to say at listings equals listing.near params location. And it's just as easy as that, which is pretty awesome. And as you can see, we put in Austin, Texas, and these are all the ones that are near Austin, Texas. We put in Dallas, Texas. We don't see any. So that's as expected because we didn't put any in that other city. We could also do a quick message on the page. So let's go to views, layouts, or no, view. Why do I keep going to layouts? Views, listings, index. And inside of this listings ID, we could just check if at listings.any. We're going to do the regular loop through. Actually, we might want to do this outside because this is specifying a grid. We could say if at listings.any, do the grid. Otherwise, let's just put out a simple message. It says like, sorry, there are no listings for this location currently. Please try a different location. And see, this is the message that we're going to see, so that's not bad. Actually, let's say, please try searching for a different location. And then I'll add a break so that this goes to the next line. And then what we can do is we can try to center the text by doing text center. Boom, that's not bad. So there's no listings for this location. Oh, another thing we should do is we should populate the field so that they know, so it's not just blank. So let's go back to the form, and on the text fields, we can pass in a value. Let's just pass in the params location, which means if they do have a result here, it's going to still show up. So they're going to see, okay, there's no listings for this. So let's try something else like Houston, which that also doesn't have any listings. But if we go to Austin, we have tons of listings. So that's already a great start. Now we just have to handle showing the map on the right side, and then also showing all the listings on the map, which, okay, we could probably just start with showing the map. That's going to be easier. And to do that, we are going to need the latitude and longitude for the location. So we might change the way that we're doing this here. So right now we're just saying listing.near, but because we need that latitude and longitude, we might want to grab the latitude and longitude for the location first and have that defined. So to do with that, we would just be doing this geocoder search code before we do our listing search. So we're going to grab the results, and then we can set the @latitude equal to results. It will just be this. The results.first.coordinate 0. And then we're going to do the longitude, which is going to be the coordinates 1. And then what we'll do is, instead of rerunning the search, because if we just pass in params location, it's going to do another search to go and grab the coordinates and then to compare the listings. But since we already have the latitude and longitude, why don't we just pass this in here? And we can actually do this by just passing in results.first.coordinates, because that's already going to be an array, which is perfect. And then boom, we have these all defined. The last thing to do is just go to the index page and actually display the map. That's what we're going to do. If we come in here, there's no, well, that's actually strange. It said there wasn't any listings. If we go, let's try to do Austin again. Austin, Texas. Interesting. I don't know why it's working differently now. We have latitude, we have longitude. This should technically work. Let's try to do just passing in the variables. Now I don't know how that would be any different. Austin, Texas. It says there's no listings. Oh, wait, hold up. Look at this. I forgot to change the Paris as the search parameter. I don't know how I missed this, guys. Sorry, I gotta focus more. So I'll pass in the params location. That's exactly why. That's so funny. Just a small thing though, not a big deal. Yeah, that is pretty funny. Okay, so now let's handle displaying the map for that location. So what we can do is, we're gonna need to change this UI. So instead of just showing this as the full width, we're gonna squish it down a little bit, which is interesting. We might just do 2 different UIs. I guess that's probably not a bad idea. So why don't we just get rid of that? I mean, let's leave the message because I already wrote that. But what we'll do is we'll check. So if params location dot present, we're going to have a whole different UI when a user is searching for location, just like Airbnb does. Otherwise, we can just show whatever our old UI was. That's just listing all of the listings in this certain grid, which has like the 4 grid column, but we're going to need something totally different if they did pass in a location. And then inside of there, we can still do this check if there was any listings. If not, show the message. But we are going to put this in the listing side, which is going to be on the left side. So first of all, let's do a div class. And I want to do grid, but if you look at Airbnb, it's not really an equal grid. It looks like the listings are taking up more space than the map, so it's a little bit different. You might just want to add a class of flex. And I'll close this off, and then we can do width full. And then we'll do another div, which is going to take up maybe like 2/3 of the width. And for this one, we can do, I guess, width full, flex call. Let's go with that. And then inside of, if there is listings, let's do another div. We'll do width full grid. And let's do grid calls 3. Because that's how many columns they have on Airbnb. It seems like it perfectly fits 3 of the listings. And then on the right side, they have the map. So that's a good start for us. And then inside of this grid, let's just grab the same code where we're rendering the listings cards. And we'll drop this in. All right, and boom, we have that handled. And we have this working. So now outside of this div, we can do another div. And let's go with full on this one. So it should take up the remaining space. And I think if we do width full on this one, it might try to go into this other space. Also, I just noticed I had width full on this one, but it's supposed to be just width 2/3. That's not good. But what we want to add is to this div with the width 2/3, we're going to add flex-shrink 0, which means it will not shrink at all. It'll take up the exact space that it wanted. And then this other div can take up whatever the remainder is, and it's not going to mess with this div. So that flex-shrink 0, I think, is pretty important. And then right here for this div, all we have to do is just grab a map and just stick it in. So I could just go back to the show page and grab our code for the map just to make this a little bit faster and drop this in. And we're going to give it that same, like the height and the width full. Now the height, we might want to make a little bit larger than just 40 view height. You'd say like 60 view height. And then for the latitude value, we're just going to pass in the latitude variable. And for longitude, we're going to pass in longitude. Just like that. We can reload. We don't have anything right now because it's the default view. But if we go and search for our location, boom, check it out. That is pretty awesome. We're already like well on our way. Okay, so there is a couple things. Like I want to add padding between each of these cards. Let's go back here. Let's go to our grid call for those cards. Let's add a gap 8. That should be good enough. And then let's also add padding so that it's not, it's not directly next to the map. And we can do that on the top level on the flex div that's wrapping both the map and the cards. We can just add a gap. So we can say gap 4, or we could increase that a little bit. Boom. And we're just popping this here. Now, as far as the marker, it's a little bit different now because we want to display all of these items on the map instead of just putting a marker right in the center. So we might want to think of how we handle this. Yeah, we probably want to think about this. So I think what we'd end up doing is we just pass in an array of all of the markers that we want to display. So first of all, we can go back to this show page and handle it there. Make sure that we're not breaking the show page when we do this. So we still are going to have the latitude and longitude, but that's just for the map. Then we can pass in something like data map markers value. And this should be an array, which essentially will just be, well, in this case, it's pretty easy. We can just pass in our own array. Let's do at, I think it might even be an array of arrays. We can do the listing.latitude and the listing.longitude. And this is just for the show page. And then we also have to convert this to JSON or else it's going to complain. And boom, now we have an array with just one single item, and that's for the show page. Then what we can do is we can go into our JavaScript. Let's go to JavaScript controllers, map controller.js, and let's define a new value, markers, which will be an array. Okay, and then right here where we're doing the marker, we are actually going to just iterate over the marker's value. We do for each. And then we'll drop this marker code inside of here, and we'll pass in, well, actually, we can just pass in marker because that is going to be an array of latitude and longitude, and that should work. Let's reload, and boom, it is still working. And if we go back over here, there's no markers yet, so we're not displaying anything. But if we go back to the index page, we can now pass in that data. So let's pass in data map markers value, and we'll set this to an array of all of our listings, latitude and longitude. So to do that easily, I think we're going to just do listings.map, and we'll map over the listing, which map already is going to return an array. And then inside of here, we can return another array with the listing.latitude and the listing.longitude. And then finally, we can convert this to JSON, and we now have an array of all of our listings, latitude and longitude. And if we reload, boom, we're now displaying the locations of all of our listings on the map, which, wow, this is insane. This is already such a great start. It's really exciting. Now, obviously, Airbnb, it has a way to click on each one. And if we wanted to add back the pop-up, we can go to map controllers and add back in this bind pop-up. So we can make each one clickable. But really what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to put our own content, just like how Airbnb has it. So you click on it, it kind of shows you the whole card details. And in my last video, I did a really hacky way of doing this, and I was not that proud of it after I released the video. But I was just trying to get it to work. It was my first time even messing with LeafletJS. So yeah, that was kind of new to me. But in this video, I'll probably do it a little bit differently. And we'll try to load up the content asynchronously via a turbo frame. That's what I thought would be a great idea. But for right now, we can just comment this out. But eventually what we'll do is we'll pass in a turbo frame for the pop-up, and then that will automatically load up the page, which will display the card details. Yeah, this is already a great start right here. I'm very happy with this setup. And yeah, this is looking awesome. The next thing I'll probably do is I'll add in some more test data in different locations, just so that we can make sure that everything looks right. And yeah, this is so exciting though. Right, and another thing real quick that we want to handle is the mobile view, so that we can make sure that our website is always responsive. So if I try to search for this location on mobile, right away it's looking not that great. So I want to try to add a mobile responsive setup for this. So let's go back to the index page, and why don't we do medium, we'll do flex row, and on smaller than that we can do flex call reverse, and I'll show you what that looks like. It'll put the map on the top, and then we have the listings at the bottom, which they're still squished. So I'm going to say the width 2/3 only happens on medium. On smaller screens, we'll do width full, which should help a little bit. But we also probably just want to go down here, and we'll do medium is grid calls 3. So on smaller screens, it'll just be the full card. And you know what? That looks pretty good, but we could squish the map a little bit. So why don't we say medium, it's height 60 view height. And on smaller, it could be something like height 40 view height, just to make this a little bit more viewable. And yeah, you know what? I think this looks pretty awesome. And then if we go back to full screen, it's still just like how we had it before. And boom, just like that, we have the mobile responsive working for this page. All right, everybody. So far we have implemented searching for listings in different areas and also displaying the map. The next thing that I want to quickly do before I end this episode is I want to be able to click on one of these markers and have it pop open a little card view for each listing, because then we can tell, you know, which is which. Because right now you can't really tell, you just see the markers like, okay, there's 5 listings here, 5 markers here, but I can't really tell which is which. And I want to be able to click on a marker and have that pop open the listing and view a little card detail just like they have on Airbnb. And to do that, we already know what we need to do. So in the map controller, we have this bind pop-up thing right here where we can run this method and bind content to put inside. And this can be text, this can be HTML, as you can see here, and it's going to render it as HTML. And like I said in my previous video on LeafletJS, I just did some crazy inline code where I rendered all the HTML and passed it into this crazy array right on the view, which I didn't think was very clean. I didn't like how I did that. It just felt pretty dirty. So in this video, I want to make it better by actually just putting a turbo frame and having that load up a page which will render the card view. And I feel like if we do that, it'll be super clean and we'll be able to do this very nicely. So I'll show you guys what I mean, and I'll show you guys how we can implement this. So first of all, we're going to need a route and a view for the card view. So let's start by going over to the app, or not the app, let's go to the config routes.rb so we can define a route. And we already have nested routes right here. We have one for photos, which is going to listings photos on member. So actually we could do a similar process for this, or we could do a whole controller just for the card view. That's what I used to do previously, but now this is kind of easy. Like you could do either way depending on how you want to organize things. But I might just do a get for card and then bring this to listings and the card action. And then we can do that same on member. So that should work. And yeah, now we're going to be able to route to a card action on the listing. And if we look at the show, so if we go to the app views, listings show page, we can see how we're doing it for photos. I just want to see that real quick. So we should have a link, show all photos, and this is going to photos underscore listing path. So it's going to be the same concept for this card route. It'll be card underscore listing path. Yep, so that should work. Now we just need to make sure we have that action defined. So let's go to the listings controller, and we can go right next to wherever we have this photos route, which is way down here. And let's add a def card. So now we have a card action. And I'm actually going to make these a one-liner. This is the super, I mean, it's not that helpful, but it can kind of slim up your code. You could do a semicolon to make this a one-liner if you're not going to have any content inside of it. So let's do that. And then we also need to make sure that we're setting the listing on that action. So if we go to the very top where we have the before action set listing, we are doing this for photos. And let's just add a space and make sure that we're doing it for card so that we have the at listing variable available in that view. And then finally, we need to go over and create the view template. So let's go to views listings, and then we'll create a new file inside of here called card.html.erb. This is going to correspond to that card action, just like we have a photos HTML template here. And then inside of the card view, we can just put whatever we want to have. For now, let's just do why don't we just print out the name of the listing? We'll just keep it simple, listing.name. And of course, we need to do this in embedded Ruby. You know what? I guess I can do a little bit of styling here, even though I don't know what it looks like. So I'll do flex call. And how about we grab the first image? So we can say listing.images.first. And we'll also check if listing.images.any. And we're going to stick this inside of an image tag. And then we can add a class. Let's do width full, and then we'll give it a fixed height of like 40. And we can do object hover, and then underneath it, we can have our listing name. And finally, let's do the listing price because we're going to want to display that. And I think for price, it's more, not just price, I think it's like nightly. What do we call it? I'm going to go check the Rails console real quick. I'll do listing.last. So we called it day price. So that's what we want to display. I just forgot what we had called it. So let's do listing.day price. And we'll display this. And we could probably make this a different color, like a green color, because that's signifying the money. And we can also do a Rails helper called number to currency to display this as a number value. And all right, now we have this card view loaded up. So if we load here, we should be able to see this card view. Now what we have to do is load this up inside of the pop-up, and I want to do that via a turbo frame. All right, so let's try to get this set up real quick. So right now, if we look, there's no pop-up available. I don't even think we have bounded a pop-up yet. So I want to get that set up. And the way that we're going to do this is we're going to need a turbo frame, first of all, on the card page. So why don't we set that up over here? So we can wrap all of this content in a turbo frame tag, and we'll have to put the name for our turbo frame. So why don't we do it using DOM ID, which if you're not familiar with DOM ID, it's a helper which will create a unique ID for your element. So the same as like if you set an ID here and set it to something, this is going to create a unique one for whatever object you pass in. So if we pass in the listing, it'll create a DOM ID for that. So it'll be something like listing dash and then the ID. And I'm also going to put in card so that we know that this is specifically a turbo frame for the card. And now we're going to do a block by saying do. And let's nest all of this content by indenting it. And then finally adding an end. So now we have the turbo frame set up on the card page. So we can close that file. I think we're good with that for now. And then let's go over to the index where we're actually rendering the map. And my plan is that, see how we're mapping over the listings right here, and we have the listing latitude, listing longitude. I'm thinking that we'll put a third value, which will be the content for the pop-up. And inside of here, all we're going to do is we're going to render a turbo frame tag that matches the one that we have on that card page. So we can actually just take this code right here, copy this, and drop it in right here. And this will render an HTML tag, but we'll do it inside of an array. And it's already a lot cleaner than my last video where I was actually writing the HTML in line. But I think this is a little bit better. Yeah, it looks clean to me. So this should be good. And I think, oh, you know what? This is going to set up the turbo frame with an ID, but it's going to be empty. So what we need to do is we need to add a source to make sure that it goes to this card path and it loads it up. So then we'll set the source here and we'll say card underscore listing path, and we'll pass in listing. And now we have a turbo frame, which will automatically load up this URL and it'll fill the content with this in that pop-up. So that is just insane. This is stuff that you can do with Hotwire and with Ruby on Rails. But let's go to the map controller in the JavaScript now, and we have to handle the JavaScript side where we will conditionally add the pop-up if we have a value for it. So first of all, let's set this marker to a variable. So, well, we already have the name marker here. Why don't we just change that to marker data? And right here, we're passing in the whole thing. So actually, we're going to need to pop that last value if that is possible. Let me see, remove last value. Oh yeah, that's, you know what, it's tricky because we need to also check, because we're going to handle multiple cases and we only want to pass in the first two values. So let's see if we can just get first two from an array. Look this up, get first two values from an array JavaScript. And it looks like we can do the slice method. Let me see how we do that. We can slice 0 to end, start to end. So hypothetically, we can add a variable called chords for coordinates, and this will be the marker data slice 0 to 1. So we'll grab the first two values, and then we'll pass this into the marker. And we need to also check the marker data after but okay, hold up. So we'd add the marker here. Let's just test if that works first of all, because I don't want to break things and then not know why. Oh, it looks like already we're seeing something. Oh, because in the template or in the index page, I accidentally left the listing as an instance variable, even though we're mapping over it, so it doesn't have the @ sign here. So that was breaking. Let me get rid of the @ sign on that page. And if we reload, now there's no errors, but I don't see the markers. So where did the markers go? That's a little bit strange. And if we go over here to the console, it says cannot read properties of null. So that's something inside of the LeafletJS code. So it looks like there is an issue in my JS. So we're passing in chords. Let's just console log the chords and see what we're getting first. And I'm going to inspect, go to console, and then reload. And we're only getting one value. So I guess my slice code doesn't work. We actually have to include up to the value that it stops at. So let's say let's say 0 to 2, and that should get 0, the item at the 0 index and the item at the first index. I guess that's how it works. And if we reload, boom, now we get the coordinates correctly. So that's looking good. And then what I want to check, after we set this marker, well, let's set it to a variable so that we can access it. So say let marker equals us setting the marker. And we might even have to separate this code. We might just have to set like the marker first, and then marker add to this map. And then we should be able to use marker to bind the pop-up, but I only want to do it if we have a third value in the array. So I want to check if, and I have to remember how do we do this, isn't it? Can we just say chords.size? Let's see. How about let's try to console log chords again. There, and then I'm going to store this as a variable. Let's see, can we do size or can we do length? There, we can do length, and then I'll just check, is it equal to 3? which right now it's not. And actually, we're not checking the chords, we're checking the marker data. But anyways, that should work. So we'll check if marker data dot length equal to 3, then we're going to show the pop-up, which I guess we don't need that comment because it's already pretty obvious. So we'll say marker dot find pop-up, and then we just have to put that value in. So why don't we just grab marker data, and we'll grab the second index, because the index starts at 0. 2 actually means the third item in the array. And I think just like that, that should set up our code. Now let's see if it works, because I've never tried to put a turbo frame inside of LeafletJS. I'm just assuming that it will work, but I hope that it does. So let's try to click. And something happens. Well, we got an error, so I guess that's not the worst thing to happen. Because we're using the name inside the listings card. I don't know why I keep using the name. It's actually called the title in this app. I put the title of the listing, although I could have easily put it as the name. So this is what the card looks like right now. Not bad. Now I just want to see, does it work on this page? If I click, check it out, guys, we're getting it. The only problem is like the card is just super skinny, which is kind of strange. I wonder if we just need a fixed width on that card page. We don't have anything right now. We just have flex call. So why don't we say width 64? And we can even give it a fixed height too if we want. Although, wait, it doesn't like that. Let's just try fixed width. Also, the turbo frame has styling too. That's another thing to note. The turbo frame itself is an element, so potentially we might need to add styling to the turbo frame, but we're not going to be able to add it on the show or on the card page, because this is just going to be used as a reference and it's going to swap the content. If we want to style the turbo frame, we actually have to go back to this index where we're originally rendering it, and we have to add a class here and put the fixed width. Now I don't even know if this will work, but I mean, is that 64? I don't know. Let's try to add a background color. See if it's getting applied. I don't see the background color. So maybe this doesn't work right here. I mean, another thing, we can inspect this pop-up element. So I can just click on it, inspect, and see what we're getting. So we do have a turbo frame with a class of BG Green 500, but it looks like the styling is just not getting applied. Because it's all like inside of this leaflet pop-up. So I wonder, how can we change the width on this? I don't think class on the turbo frame does much. So how to set width of LeafletJS pop-up. I feel like it should automatically know the width. You can set max width and min width, but I feel like it should automatically set the width of the pop-up. It's kind of interesting. Maybe if I go inside card and I try to edit it again, we can give it a fixed width, like width 300 pixels. Now, like, our content, it shows up correctly, but the card, for whatever reason, the card is just not, it's not liking this. So maybe it is because of this turbo frame, our turbo frame tag. It's like taking up space. Let me see if I can set a width on this with 300 pixels on turbo frame. And it doesn't seem right. We can do flex call, see if that helps. Sometimes adding flex class. It's always the flex class, guys. So adding a flex class on the turbo frame somehow fixes this. Now, the one thing I don't like is that the pop-up is just so ginormous. And also, like, why is there this padding between some of the elements? Even though I didn't set any padding. See, there's no padding here. Maybe it's because we're using the p tag and there's some styling with leaflet. So let's try to switch to a span. See if that does anything. Hey, that actually helps a lot. And then, all right, not bad. So then I could try to just go back and maybe do a smaller width. Let's try to do like width 64 in Tailwind. And I mean, you know what? I don't hate this. I don't hate this because you can clearly see which listing it is. So that's really all I wanted to do. And then I guess if we could just make it so that um, maybe there's like a link to view the listing. We could probably do that and then call this a day on the video, and I would be very happy with this. So let's try to do a link to view listing. And this is going to go to, of course, the listing path, but because it's Rails, we can just pass in @listing as a shortcut. And then we can do a little styling on the button or on the link. And let's do a gradient because I love gradients. Let's do a gradient to right from pink 500 to indigo 500, text indigo 100. See what that looks like. Boom, we have view listing as a link. And again, I think Leaflet is doing some styling because see how my link is a little bit dark, the text. And I figured out how to get around this by we put a exclamation mark before the Tailwind class. It's the same as saying at like exclamation important. It'll force it to be that even if there's some styling that's overriding it. And I'm also going to do MR auto so that it doesn't take up the full width of the card. It just pushes itself to the left, which I think looks good. Although I might want to put it on the right. I'm not sure. Maybe we'll do ML auto. So it'll go to the right side. Yeah, you know what? I like that a little bit better because it's just the organization of everything. And then you click view listing and oh, now it's trying to navigate the turbo frame, which is kind of funny. So it's trying to do a turbo frame. Well, we have a turbo frame here, so that's what's happening. What we're going to want to do is on this link, we just need to break out of the turbo frame. And that's something you can do by saying target top. And it's going to target the top of the page instead of targeting inside of the turbo frame. And as you can see, that works very nicely. Now, the only thing, like, I'm very happy with it. I'm so happy with this, guys. The only thing I was just noticing is that when you click the back button, it doesn't preserve your search, which I can see already, like, when you're on Airbnb, I'm pretty sure it would, but when you click back here, it just gets rid of the search. Although I guess that doesn't bother me that much, I'm not gonna lie. But if we wanted to, we could try to pass in the location backwards or do something. I don't know. I think this is honestly fine. The only reason I guess, you know why I think it's strange is because we still have it here inside of the text field. But then when we click, I mean, you know what? I'm fine with this. So yeah, anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this, learned something new. The next thing I'll probably do is add some more listings, but in different places. So like, it would be nice if we could have other places that we could search for and just get a good grasp on how this app works a little bit better. This is already so amazing, guys. We built this whole addition to the Airbnb series, and I want to keep going. And if you guys have any suggestions, drop them below. I know it's been a long time since I worked on this series, but I'm excited to get back into it. And I know there's plenty of stuff we can do, like, for example, the booking process. I don't really know how built out this booking process is. I know it works from the last time I did it, but we might not even have stuff like emails and check-in processes and all of those sorts of things that we want to add. So I will be working on that, and I'll try to get a whole second series out for this Airbnb app. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed, and thanks for tuning into my channel. Or yeah, and like I said, I'm gonna go and try to find some more listing data. So let's go to Airbnb again, and let's do Dallas because I keep thinking about Dallas. Let's see what type of Airbnbs they have in Dallas. Look, this is a room. This isn't even a whole house. That's another thing that we have to work on is specifying which type of rental it is. Like, is it an apartment? Is it a house? So we should work on that. How about this? Guest house. Ooh, home in Dallas. That looks pretty nice, but that is expensive. Okay, so let's put the entire home in Dallas, Texas. Cool. And we'll do value. So it's 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, 6 people. Price is $446. And description, let's grab that. Whoops. So we'll copy all this description, plop it in, and Then for the address, let's go to Zillow again. And I'll look up Dallas. And I'm just going to grab, I guess let me just change the home type. Let's look for, oh yeah, look, I was looking for apartments and condos. That's why I was getting those results. So let's just go straight to homes. And then we're going to get the right address. One that'll work with our free geocoding solution. And then I'm going to grab the images. Let me make sure I don't have any other images because I don't want to confuse them. And let's go back here. And it was this one. Let's go to the photos. And I'm just going to, save a bunch of these. Boom, Dallas, and it's right on the map already. That's so beautiful. Yeah, then if we wanted to go and search for houses in Dallas, we have one house in Dallas. And if we go back to Austin, we have a house over in Austin. Yeah, this is beautiful. I hope you guys enjoyed. And yeah, expect so many more videos on this series. I'm really excited about this. This is just, it looks really good to me. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoy and stay tuned for future videos.